Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we get into our new episode, let's recap the thrilling events from our last story. In our unwritten episode 65, Ty's team launched their daring ambush on Nathan's prisoner transport convoy. In a chaotic and explosive firefight on a remote mountain road, they successfully intercepted one of the armored vans and rescued a captive Scott Cardinal. But the victory was incomplete. The second van, carrying Peter Morris, managed to break through their blockade and escape into the night, racing towards an unknown and certainly more dangerous destination. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now today, the cost of their fractured victory becomes clear, as a freed Scott reveals the terrifying nature of Nathan's new endgame. The safe house was a small modern A-frame cabin nestled deep in a valley Val Stanton owned on the other side of the mountains. It was clean, it was warm, and it was a world away from the chaos of the night before. But the mood inside was far from celebratory. It was the somber and heavy quiet of a victory that felt too much like a defeat. The team was battered and bruised and exhausted. They sat in the main room, nursing mugs of a hot coffee, the adrenaline of the firefight having long since faded, leaving behind a deep and aching weariness. They had won. They had gotten one of their own back. Scott Cardinal, who was sitting wrapped in a thick blanket by the fire, was proof of that. But the empty space in the room, the space that should have been filled by Peter Morris, was a gaping and painful wound. Scott was a ghost of the man they knew. His time in Nathan's clinical facility had taken a terrible toll. He was gaunt, his face pale, and there was a haunted and distant look in his eyes that chilled them all to the bone. He had barely spoken since they had pulled him from the transport van, his usual calm and reassuring demeanor replaced by a fragile and unnerving stillness. Ty knelt in front of him, his own voice gentle, careful.
Scott, we're so glad you're back. We're so glad you're safe.
Scott just gave a slow and almost imperceptible nod, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames of the fire.
But we need your help. We have to find Peter. Anything you saw, anything you heard, no matter how small, it could be the thing that helps us get him back.
Scott was silent for a long moment, as if he were trying to pull a memory from a deep and dark well. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low and raspy whisper, the sound of a man who had not used it in a very long time. It wasn't a prison. Not like the one you were in, Caleb. There were no beatings. There was no overt cruelty. It was worse. He described the place, his words painting a chilling picture of a sterile, white, and windowless world, a place of a total sensory deprivation, of a constant low humming sound that was designed to unbalance the mind, of a silent and ever-present observation. They played games, psychological games. They would bring me meals and then take them away before I could eat. They would alter the temperature in the room, from a sweltering heat to a freezing cold. They wanted to break my mind, not my body. They wanted to make me pliable. The team listened, their own faces a mask of a growing horror. This was the fate that Peter was now enduring, alone. The guards, they were different after the news broke. About Price's company, they were panicked. I could hear them talking in the corridor. They were scared. And then, the order came down. He looked at Ty, the haunted look in his eyes, now replaced by a new and urgent fire. Nathan is losing it, Ty. He's completely unhinged. He was pulling all of his assets, as he calls us, to one single location, a place he called his final sanctuary. The mountain fortress. That's where Peter was going. It's where Amy is. It's his endgame. He's putting everyone he values, everyone he wants to control, in one single and impenetrable cage. The information was a confirmation of their worst fears. They had saved Scott, but in doing so, they had simply hastened the inevitable. Peter and Amy were now, or would be soon, in the one place they had all agreed was completely and utterly unreachable.
So we got one out, only to have the other two locked away in a place we can never get to.
His voice was a low growl of a pure and helpless frustration. The victory of the night before now felt completely and utterly hollow. They had won a battle, but the strategic cost had been catastrophic. The war, it seemed, was now well and truly lost. The mountain fortress was a place of a silent and glacial rage. Nathan Price stood before the main monitor in his command center, his hands clasped behind his back, and watched the footage of the highway ambush on a repeating loop. He watched the chaos, the smoke, the flash of his own men being disoriented. He watched his armored transport being breached. He watched as the man, the veterinarian, Scott Cardinal, was pulled from the van and spirited away into the darkness by the ghosts who haunted his every move. Gracie stood a few feet behind him, a silent and watchful presence. She had seen him in a rage before, the explosive and violent loss of a control that had wrecked his previous command center. This was different. This was worse. This was not the hot and chaotic fury of a man who has lost his temper. This was the cold and absolute fury of a king who has been outmaneuvered, a god who has just been reminded of his own and fallible mortality. He finally turned off the footage, the screen going black, plunging the room into a dim and oppressive quiet.
Pathetic.
His voice was a low and venomous whisper.
Outmaneuvered by a horse doctor and a washed-up rodeo star. My entire multi-million-dollar security apparatus brought to its knees by a handful of sentimental ranchers with a grudge.
He turned to Gracie, his eyes like two small chips of a polished stone.
This was a failure of a strategy. My strategy. I scattered my assets, thinking it would make them harder to find, harder to attack. I was wrong. I didn't create a series of strong points. I just created more points of a failure, more opportunities for them to find a weak link, more loose threads for them to pull on.
He walked to the massive window and looked out at the storm-racked peaks, at the impenetrable and natural fortress that surrounded his home.
No more scattered assets, no more weak links. I'm bringing everything in-house, under one roof. My roof. From now on, the war will be fought on my terms, on my ground.
His focus and his fury now narrowed to a single and precise point.
They got the doctor. A sentimental loss, perhaps, but strategically, a minor one, a pawn. But they did not get the piece I truly need. They did not get the bishop.
Gracie knew exactly who he was talking about. Peter Morris, the businessman, the man whose own brilliant mind was one of the few in the country that could rival Nathan's own.
The media war is a disaster. My board is in a panic. The government is preparing to freeze my assets. I need a master strategist, a financial genius who can navigate this storm, who can find the loopholes, who can hide my empire in a place where they will never find it. And the universe, in its infinite and ironic wisdom, has just delivered the perfect candidate right to my doorstep.
A slow and cruel smile began to spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just seen a path to a new and even more satisfying kind of a victory.
I am not just going to imprison him. I am not going to let him rot in a cell. That would be a waste of a magnificent resource. No, I am going to put him to work. He is going to use his brilliant little mind to save my company. He is going to fight this corporate war for me, whether he wants to or not. He will become the architect of his own family's final and financial defeat.
The poetic and twisted injustice of the plan was a thing of a pure and sociopathic beauty. He would not just break Peter Morris. He would corrupt him. He would turn him into an unwilling accomplice. He walked to his desk and hit the button on his secure intercom.
Kessler.
His head of a security's voice was an instant and nervous reply. Yes, sir.
The transport carrying asset Morris. Its destination has been changed. Divert it. Bring him directly to me, here, at the fortress.
Yes, sir.
And Kessler. Prepare the West Wing guest suite. Our new and very important financial consultant will require a comfortable office for the work that lies ahead.
He cut the connection. He had turned a catastrophic and humiliating tactical defeat into a brilliant and chilling new strategic opportunity. He had lost a pawn, but he was about to capture his opponent's most powerful and most valuable piece. The journey to the mountain fortress was a silent and grim affair. Peter Morris sat in the back of the armored van, his hands bound in front of him, his mind a cold and calculating machine. He was no longer the terrified and disoriented captive from the initial ambush. The fear was still there, a cold and hard knot in his stomach, but it was now a secondary emotion, a tool to be managed, not a state of a being. His primary focus was on an analysis, on an observation, on a survival. He watched the landscape change through the small, reinforced window, from the rolling and familiar foothills to the jagged and unforgiving peaks of the deep mountains. He was being taken to the heart of his enemy's kingdom, and he was preparing himself for the audience with the king. When he arrived, he was not dragged to a dungeon. He was escorted, with a strange and almost respectful formality, by two silent black-clad guards through the vast and imposing halls of Nathan's fortress. The place was a monument to a cold and minimalist power, a place of a polished stone and a dark glass and a profound and intimidating silence. He was brought to a suite of rooms in the West Wing. The guards unlocked the door and gestured for him to enter. It was not a cell. It was a luxurious and beautifully appointed guest suite, with a comfortable-looking bed, a small, elegant living area, and a massive floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking and vertiginous view of the storm-racked mountains. The guards removed his restraints and then left, the heavy door closing with a soft and final click behind them. Peter was left alone. He did not relax. He did not admire the view. He began a slow and methodical inspection of his new and elegant prison. He noted the reinforced and shatterproof glass of the window. He noted the absence of any real handle on the inside of the door, and he noted the small and almost invisible dark circles of the hidden surveillance cameras nestled in the corners of the ceiling. It was a cage, just a more comfortable one, a place designed not to break the body, but to lull the mind into a false sense of a security. An hour later, the door hissed open again. Nathan Price entered, alone. He was dressed impeccably, his calm and confident composure completely restored. He was carrying a thin, leather-bound folder.
Welcome to my home, Peter. I trust the accommodations are to your liking. I find the view to be inspiring.
Peter turned from the window to face him, his own expression a mask of a cold and unwavering contempt. What do you want, Nathan? Nathan gave a small and indulgent smile, as if he were dealing with an impatient and slightly foolish child.
Straight to business. I've always admired that about you. What I want is your help.
He walked over to the sleek modern desk that stood in the corner of the room and placed the folder on it.
My empire, as I'm sure you're aware, is currently under a coordinated and malicious attack. An attack, I might add, that was orchestrated by your wife. I find myself in need of a man with a certain talent for navigating complex financial storms. I need a man who knows how to make legal problems disappear. I need you.
Peter just stared at him, a look of a pure and unadulterated disbelief on his face. You're insane. You're actually certifiably insane if you think for 1 second that I would ever lift a finger to help you.
I thought you might say that.
Nathan's smile did not falter. He walked over to a large dark television screen that was mounted on the wall. He picked up a remote.
You are a man of a logic, Peter. So let me present you with a new set of variables.
He turned the screen on. It flickered to life, showing a crisp and high-definition live feed. It was a street in Vancouver, outside a hospital. Peter's blood ran cold. Nathan used the remote to zoom in, the camera's movements smooth and professional. The image settled on a woman getting into a car. It was Lou, his Lou.
Your wife is a very predictable woman, a creature of a habit. She leaves the hospital every evening at the same time. It would be a tragedy if something were to happen to her on her drive home. A car accident, perhaps, a mugging gone wrong. The world is such a dangerous place.
He clicked a button, and the image on the screen changed. It was another live feed, this one of a sun-drenched and beautiful equestrian facility in Florida. A young woman was taking a horse over a series of massive jumps. Georgie...
And your daughters! So talented, so full of a promise. It would be a terrible shame for their careers or their lives to be cut tragically short by some unforeseen and completely random accident.
The threat was not a shout. It was a quiet and conversational and absolutely and monstrously clear. Peter stared at the screen at the images of the people he loved most in the world, and the defiant anger in his heart was extinguished, replaced by a cold and suffocating wave of a pure terror. He was completely and utterly checkmated. Nathan turned the screen off.
I need you to find a way to make my legal problems disappear, to protect my assets, to win this war for me.
He gestured to the folder on the desk.
You have 24 hours to present me with a preliminary strategy. I trust you will make the wise and logical decision, for their sake.
He turned and walked to the door, leaving Peter alone in the beautiful, silent room, a prisoner who had just been handed the most terrible and impossible choice of his life, to betray his own soul or to condemn his family to death. The 24 hours that followed were the longest of Peter Morris's life. He did not sleep, he did not eat. He sat at the sleek modern desk in his luxurious prison, and he worked. He opened the folder Nathan had left for him, and he read. He consumed the data, the complex financial reports, the labyrinthine network of shell corporations, the evidence of a years-long campaign of a corruption so vast and so brilliant that it was almost a work of art. He was a man who understood the language of a power, of a money, of an influence, and as he read, he saw the full and terrifying scope of Nathan Price's genius. But he also saw his weaknesses, his arrogance, his over-leveraged positions, the small and almost invisible cracks in the foundation of his immense and seemingly untouchable empire. He was a man with a choice. He could refuse, and in doing so, he would be signing the death warrant for his wife and his daughters. Or he could cooperate. He could use his own considerable genius to save the monster who was threatening his family. He could become the architect of his own and final moral defeat. But as the night wore on, as the storm outside the massive window began to subside, a third and far more dangerous option began to take shape in his mind. When Nathan entered the suite the next day, he found Peter exactly where he had left him. He was sitting at the desk, a secure and top-of-the-line computer terminal having been installed by the guards. He was dressed in a fresh shirt, his hair was combed, and he had a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked less like a prisoner and more like a high-powered consultant who had just pulled an all-nighter before a big meeting.
Show me what you have.
His voice was a cold and impatient command. He had not come for a debate, he had come for a solution. Peter turned in his chair to face him, his own expression a mask of a cool and professional detachment. He was no longer the defiant and emotional man from the day before. He was a businessman, analyzing a problem. "Your situation is precarious," he said, his voice a calm and analytical murmur. "The leak was substantial. The damage to your stock value is catastrophic, but it is not irreversible. Your biggest problem is not the financial loss. It is the narrative, the public story. Right now, you are a villain. We need to change that." He turned to the screen and began his performance. It was the performance of his life. The allegations of an insider trading are the most damaging. We cannot fight them directly. The evidence is too clean. So we make them irrelevant. We pivot. We create a new and more compelling story. He laid out his strategy. It was a brilliant and genuinely effective plan to save Nathan's company. But woven into its very fabric was a single and almost invisible thread of a pure poison. "We sell. We liquidate one of your major and seemingly profitable subsidiaries, a company called GenChem Resources. We do it publicly. We announce that you, Nathan Price, in your commitment to a corporate transparency, have discovered irregularities within your own company and are taking swift and decisive action to clean house. You will be the one who exposed the corruption. You will be the hero of the story, all over again." Nathan listened, a slow and calculating look on his face. He was intrigued.
GenChem is one of my most profitable divisions. Selling it would be a major loss.
A short-term loss for a long-term and total victory. The sale will generate a massive and immediate influx of a liquid capital. We use that capital to initiate an aggressive stock buyback. It will stabilize the price and it will show the market that you have an absolute confidence in the future of your own company. You will not just survive this scandal, Nathan. You will emerge from it looking like a visionary, a corporate statesman. The plan was a masterpiece of a public relations judo, using the force of the attack against itself. Nathan was impressed, but he was also suspicious.
And why GenChem? Why that specific subsidiary?
Peter met his gaze, his own expression a perfect mask of a pure and professional logic. "Because it is the cleanest. It is the one single division of your entire empire that my initial analysis shows has no ties, however remote, to the Northgate Biologicals Shell Corporation. It is the one asset you can sacrifice that will not lead the investigators any closer to your other business interests." It was a brilliant lie, wrapped in a perfect and undeniable truth. GenChem was, in fact, the one company that was inextricably and secretly linked to Nathan's vast and illegal smuggling operations. To sell it, to open its books to a public audit, would be to not just cut off a branch of his empire, it would be to poison the very roots of it. Nathan stared at him for a long and silent moment, a high-stakes and completely invisible chess match being played out in the space between them. Peter did not flinch. He held his gaze, a man who was betting the lives of his family on a single and masterful bluff. Finally, Nathan gave a slow and satisfied nod.
It's a bold strategy. Aggressive. I like it. Begin the preparations immediately. You will have a full access to our financial servers.
He turned to leave and then paused at the door, a final and cautionary warning in his voice.
But know this, Peter. I will be watching every move you make, every transfer, every call. One mistake, one hint of a betrayal, and your family will pay the price for it.
The door closed, leaving Peter alone in his office, his prison. He turned back to the screen, his heart a frantic and hammering drum against his ribs. He had done it. He had bought himself time. He had just begun the most dangerous and most important game of his entire life, a lonely, high-wire act with the lives of his family as the only safety net. Days bled into a monotonous and terrifying routine. Peter Morris became the perfect and most valuable prisoner. He worked. He sat at the secure and constantly monitored computer terminal in his suite for 18 hours a day, a man possessed. He dove deep into the labyrinthine and corrupt financial records of Nathan Price's empire, and he began with a brilliant and terrifying precision to save it. He drafted memos, he built spreadsheets, he restructured debt. He initiated the sale of the GenChem subsidiary, his Trojan horse, the perfect and logical move that no one, not even Nathan's own high-priced financial advisors, could argue with. He was a master at his craft, and he was playing the role of the loyal and co-opted consultant to perfection. Nathan was pleased. He would visit once a day, a king checking on the progress of his most prized and useful new acquisition. He would review Peter's work, a look of a genuine and impressed satisfaction on his face. He saw Peter's tireless work not as an act of a coercion, but as the natural and inevitable result of a superior intellect recognizing and submitting to an even greater one. He saw it as a victory. Peter, for his part, played the role flawlessly. He was calm, professional, and deferential. He showed Nathan the work, he explained his strategies, and he died a little inside with every single brilliant move he made that helped to solidify his enemy's empire. He was a man walking a tightrope over a canyon of a pure and moral despair, and the lives of his family were the only thing that kept him from looking down. His real work, his true mission, began late at night in the quiet and lonely hours when he was supposed to be sleeping. He was not just working on Nathan's finances. He was exploring. He was a digital ghost, moving silently through the dark and secret corridors of the fortress's internal network, a place he had been granted access to, a place he was sure Nathan was not watching as closely. He was looking for anything: a security schematic, a guard rotation schedule, a communication log, any small and insignificant piece of a data that he could use, that he could somehow and some way get to the outside world. He had been searching for a week, a fruitless and soul-crushing exercise, when he found it. It was not a file. It was not a log. It was an anomaly, a tiny and almost imperceptible flicker in the network's diagnostic report. A corrupted data packet, a ghost in the machine that appeared and then vanished on a seemingly random and repeating cycle. To a normal system administrator, it would have been a minor and insignificant bug, a piece of a digital noise to be ignored. But Peter was not a normal administrator. His mind was trained to see patterns, to find the one single data point that did not belong. His curiosity, the instinct that had made him a titan of the financial world, was piqued. He began to investigate, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his movements a quiet and secret dance. He was careful, covering his tracks, routing his inquiries through a series of complex and untraceable internal proxies. He isolated the anomaly, and he ran a deep and forensic diagnostic on it. The result made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was not a bug. It was not a system error. It was a message, a tiny and almost undetectable data loop, a repeating signal that was hidden in the background noise of the server's normal operations. It was a digital beacon, a silent and desperate and absolutely brilliant cry for a help. His heart began to pound a slow and heavy rhythm against his ribs. He traced the signal's origin point within the fortress's internal network, and his blood ran cold. It was coming from another suite in his wing, the suite that the architectural plans he had managed to glimpse had designated for Asset Fleming. Amy. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. She was here, in this same fortress, just a few and impossibly distant rooms away, and she was not a passive and broken victim. She was a fighter. She had found a way, a brilliant and impossibly risky way, to create a tiny and almost invisible crack in Nathan's perfect digital prison. She was calling out into the void, hoping, praying that someone, somewhere would be listening. Peter stared at the signal on his screen, a single and pulsing green light on his diagnostic display. His lonely and one-man standoff was over. He was not alone. He had an ally. The focus of his mission changed in that instant. It was no longer just about a survival, about a sabotage. It was now about a contact. He had to find a way to respond to her signal. He had to find a way to let her know that she was not alone, that he was here. He had to do it without alerting the digital warden, Nathan Price, who was watching his every single move. The game had just become infinitely more complex, and for the first time in a very long time, it had just become infinitely more hopeful.